real quickly with Dennis and what he's seen. And I don't know if Dave's got any in here or not, but you want to go ahead and take us through that?
Okay, like Jim said, there was just some pictures and that type of thing. Just wanted to show you what we're seeing. This is Ken here. Our starter program we had. Look at the root system and look at the difference in height. This is Ken had some issues with the starter. This plant didn't get any starter at all, any of the biological program. This plant did. But there's a difference of 4 or 5 inches there. Look at your root system here too. Look at the amount of root hairs on this plant versus this one. This one's going to struggle if we ever get into a drought. I see an issue if we do go into a drought that our roots are not going very deep. So some of these fields that have these shallow root systems, they don't have a lot of root hairs, are really going to struggle.
Especially when we have a wind event or something like that.
Yep, exactly.
That wind, 85-mile-an-hour wind still, with that good root system, still didn't help much.
No.
You might be surprised when you get back from gambling, it'll all be straight back up.
And here's a picture of Ken's soil right here. Look at the biology. We were talking about the cottage cheese effect that Miles was talking about. I call it the coffee ground effect, same type of thing. Look at the PEDs. This soil just falls apart nicely in your hand and crumbles, but it's going to infiltrate. That water's going to go right through it. You're not going to have ponding on top of the ground. You have structure to this. You have glumalin in it. All the bonds to hold that soil together and keep it from eroding. There's more organic matter in it, and this soil is going to get through a drought much better than a soil that we were talking about before, that blocky stuff right there. It's got the sharp angles. You can't penetrate that unless you have a hammer. And here's just another picture of the roots. Look at the amount of root hairs on this plant. We do have the bioseed coat on this. So we've got the mycorrhizae fungi, we've got the Pseudomonas, I'm trying to think of all the different ones, Trichoderma in there. All these different organisms are promoting growth, promoting vigor, promoting germination, and of course promoting root hairs and mycorrhizae growth. And I think you would see mycorrhizae in here if you had a microscope.
Which one is that, Dennis? Is that the bioseed coat from?
This is one. He only had 1 row out of what, 24. 2 rows out of 24 that didn't have the starter on it. Basically, that's his check, but it was an accident. It wasn't an accident. The starter came off in those tubes, but this is with all the program, with all the products. And also, he put soft rock phosphate and elemental sulfur on in the fall as well.
Okay.
So, and he used anhydrous, but we won't go there.
Why did you do
That's
that?
the tillage program.
Tillage program, you're using like a chisel, didn't you?
And our chisel plow last fall, I put anhydrous
With
on
anhydrous.
with knives.
Yeah.
And once on this field, once across with Great Plains Turbo Max, the next year.
And again, here's another comparison with the starter program versus the control. Look at the amount of root hairs. The roots are going much deeper, much more fibrous root system, broader root system.
These plants are taken, from this row to this row, right straight across from each other.
Yep, side by side. And here's a picture of his soybeans. Look how tiny these soybeans are, but look at the root system down here. There's a tremendous amount of root hairs on these plants. You don't see soybeans like that typically. Typically what you see is a few, maybe 3 or 4 roots on a plant like this, and no root hairs, very few nodules.
These have lots of nodules.
They do. Right here you can see the nodules. And soybeans have really been struggling this year because it's been too cold and too wet, especially up in your neck of the woods. But these were doing pretty good compared to some of the other fields. And here's a closer up look of the soybean plant, the amount of root hairs and how deep those roots are going. Nice big nodule right there. This is something I wanted to talk about a little bit too. The use of starter fertilizer, I think, is extremely important. And especially in our cold, wet soils. This is from South Dakota. That's not Ponset. I put the wrong label on there. This is from a farmer up by his area. And it's actually fallow syndrome. But my point is that when you don't use starter, you don't have the uptake of phosphorus, and you're going to get plants like this. They'll turn purple, like this, and that's a buildup of sugars. And what fallow syndrome is basically they didn't have anything on that land because it was a PP. So they didn't put a cover crop or anything out there. Nothing was growing, so you didn't have anything for the mycorrhizae to feed on. So they had no mycorrhizae. They came back, planted corn the next season, and since they didn't use a starter, they had no phosphorus uptake whatsoever. So these plants are just starving for phosphorus. So the point of it is definitely think about using a starter fertilizer. And if you are going to use a starter fertilizer, we like to put the BioRelease in there to stabilize it. And what it does is it takes your phosphorus, which is a 3 negative charge, phosphorus, and turns it into a neutral charge so it doesn't tie up with calcium and magnesium and that type of thing. You're going to get more efficient use out of that starter.